Okay, so let's start. We will be doing, we'll just go over what we did towards the end, the graph coloring, and then we'll move to the next topic.
Sakib, would you like to record? I mean,
What?
just a reminder. I would like to remind you that you forget to record the lecture.
I think I'm recording. Am I not?
Oh, I don't know.
I think
Yes,
I'm.
recording is on. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot, Nidhi.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So last time we studied what is this graph coloring problem, where you basically want to color the graphs with delta plus one color, where delta is the maximum degree of the graph. And we know there is a very simple basic greedy algorithm for this problem, which basically says, well, you just color your vertex greedily at any way you wish. At any point of time, you look at a vertex, and if and look at the color which is not being used in its neighbors, use that color and go ahead. But we know that such algorithms are almost impossible to implement in streaming setting. And then in 2019, a very beautiful paper came which talked about palette sparsification. So what is the palette sparsification? So palette sparsification is very simple procedure. So if you recall, what we did is that for all V in V, it selects some alpha log n colors from the palette of 1 to delta plus 1 uniformly at random. Okay. And just 1 second. Okay. Okay. And so what did it tell us that now if you've done this and you construct the following conflict graph, where what you have is that you have all the vertices of the graph, and you put an edge if their corresponding lists intersect, right? So this helps us. So you do not keep those edges. If you look at their endpoints, and their endpoints, the pairwise intersection of the endpoints of these lists are empty. Okay, and this is what we call conflict graph. And how can we construct such a graph in streaming setting? That is very easy, because what we have done in the beginning, that for all vertex we have sampled a set LV of 4 log n colors from 1 to 2 delta uniformly at random and independently. So we already have formed the list even before the graph has started to come. And during the stream, we store any edge UV in subgraph H if the list is non-empty. Okay. And at the end of the stream, we had this simple greedy list coloring algorithm. Okay. Greedy list coloring algorithm. Okay. So which basically did exactly what was done before, but now it with respect to lists. So it arbitrarily goes through the vertices in the stream, and for every vertex, it tries to color with one of its available color. Okay, this is what it does. So if its list is empty, it says the algorithm has failed and it goes away. Okay, but for any vertex V, if LV equal to non-empty, then it just assigns this vertex with that color and removes that color from the list of all its neighbors, and that's enough. Okay. And we only talked, so we made 2 assumptions. First is that delta is known to the algorithm, and second assumption we did that edge insertion model. Okay. So to prove the correctness of this algorithm, we had 2 lemma. Okay. First, the number of edges in the subgraph of H is like order n log squared n with high probability. So basically the conflict graph is sparse. Okay. So basically conflict graph is sparse. Okay. And only reason we can't say anything is that the list coloring algorithm which we apply, the greedy list coloring algorithm, at the end, it fails. So we would like to show another thing: with high probability, algorithm 1 does not output fail. So these are the 2 regions, these were the 2 important things that we needed to prove to show that algorithm is correct. So if we first prove this lemma 2, which showed that algorithm 1 does not output fail. And to do that, we said, look at any arbitrary list arbitrary ordering of the vertices. And if we are at a VIth level, why is this vertex not being able to color? Because when I look at its neighbors, okay, the list which it contains, right, has all the vertices which are in its neighbors, right? But look, we are sampling this. So we made a relaxation last time, and we were sampling this from not a palette of 1 to delta, but a palette of 2 delta. Okay. So when we do a palette of 2 delta, then we say, what is the probability that LV contains no good color? It means in the first time when we selected a vertex, it picked a color which is already present on one of its neighbors in this ordering. Okay. So that is like, suppose it has L neighbors. So we are sampling from this is L over 2 delta. In the second time, you again, because you are going to sample S vertices. So second time you do this is like, okay, I already have, so among the L-1 remaining colors available on my neighbors, I picked up with L-1 out of 2 delta minus 1 choices, so on and so forth. And each of this is bounded by half. So half to the power S was 1 to the power n4. And if you do union bound over all V, you can show that with very high probability, this algorithm, this greedy algorithm is going to pass. And notice that this algorithm is, which we did, we could have done this analysis even when our palette was 1 plus epsilon times delta, because then then it will be 1 plus epsilon to the power S. And then if you choose S appropriately, slightly bigger constant, a constant which will depends on, like, so S will be now not anything, but it will be some function of epsilon term log n. Then we can say that this is again bounded by some 1 to the power n4, and we can do this. Okay. So we can decrease the palette size to 1 plus epsilon in this analysis. Okay. Okay. But, and similarly now, so this was a good thing, that even if we had a smaller palette, this algorithm will work. Now, what was an argument for what do you call number of edges is small? There are, like, I mean, what I gave to you is a very argument which was very rigorous, but intuitively you can think that how many edges do you have? Roughly you have n delta edges. And what is the probability that this particular edge will survive? So, well, you're giving it a list of size log n, and you should, and you need to find a list for another vertex, which is like, which should intersect with this list. So basically it is like log n over delta. So it is like delta will get cancelled, and it is n to the power log square. But of course, this is like proof. This is not proof. But if you do it formally, we were able to show that that every vertex has degree at most log square n. Or in other words, look at any vertex, look at its list, and then look at the list of all its neighbors. It only intersects with the list of log square n neighbors. Okay, that's all. And if you think about it, why this is conceivably okay is that when the palette is big, you have many subsets of size log n, and when up to, say, when the palette is like log square n, anyway graph edge is like sparse because you have n delta edges. So in some sense, the moment the number of edges become far too much compared to log n, we start to make progress. Okay, and that is what this proof tried to show us. Okay, so first we showed that the expected degree of every vertex is bounded by 8 log square n, and then we noticed that, look, each of this is like this is basically sum of some indicator random variable. So we can throw Chernoff, and that will imply the probability that degree of any vertex is more than its, like twice its expectation, is less than 1 to the power n5, and then you can do union bound over all vertices. Okay, and then I made some comments last time about that. So notice that this proof here, second proof, will even go if we choose everything from the palette of size delta plus 1. What does not go through is the second proof if I would have chosen my colors from palette of delta plus 1, because now this is like 1 over this is like delta by 2 delta, delta by delta plus 1, and delta minus something something. So this is very bad probability if you choose from the palette of size delta plus 1. So this proof lemma 2 that the greedy algorithm which I told does not output fail will not hold. But the first thing will hold, that even if you choose this this palettes or this lists for each vertex from a palette of size delta plus 1, the number of edges in your graph is still roughly n log square. Okay. And then I told you that, so there was a very nice question that, okay, what about that fine for every v in delta plus 1, order log n is nice, good. But is this, so what are we getting? Given a graph G, we are constructing an H, which is an instance of list coloring, where lists have size order log n. Okay, and what this palette sparsification theorem says, that there exists with very high probability, we can come up with H, which is a subgraph of G, and list of size order log n, such that H is list colorable. So given a graph G, we are creating an instance of list coloring, such that first of all, this list coloring has a property that with a very high probability it is list colorable, and secondly, like any list coloring of H is actually a coloring of G. Okay, so the people ask that, is order log n required, or we can have a smaller sized list? And people prove that this is not, omega log n is tight. And then later paper this year, a few months back, Elon and Safari showed that if I allow ourselves to have slightly more colors than delta, like multiplicatively, then actually, for example, then square root log n over epsilon square. So for example, the regime which I was talking about, say 2 delta, in fact, for 2 delta, order log n size lists are good enough for this. Look, there are two things. So the big open problem has been the can you do this deterministically? So let's go back to our algorithm and see what is happening to our algorithm. So first thing to notice is that what we showed is that a particular algorithm, okay, does not fail with high probability, right? That was list greedy algorithm. List greedy list coloring algorithm, right? But for a palette sparsification theorem to hold, I don't care whether list coloring algorithm succeeds or not. All I care about is that given a graph G, can I come up with an instance H and LV, V in VG, okay, from a palette of say delta plus 1, such that H is list colorable with high probability. I do not care whether this, like, because this is the list coloring, whether this is poly time solvable or not, right? So we should not we shouldn't constrain ourselves that, okay, we have to come with an algorithm for this list coloring, okay, such that we can solve it efficiently. No, all we are talking about at this point of time, can we come up, given a graph G, can we come up with a list coloring instance such that such that with very high probability it is list colorable, and we can lift the list coloring of H to a coloring of G. Okay, and the way we have constructed our config graph, we will not even worry about the fact that we can lift the list coloring of H to G, but all we care about, can we, that this is list colorable with high probability. Okay, so we have not exploited this yet. So now, before I go to the general proof strategy or theorem, I would like to say that there are a few things that we should try to see in this algorithm. Okay. First question. Okay. How can we make this work in turnstile model? Okay. Let's ask. Okay. How can we what change should we do to our algorithm? Any suggestion?
Well, we have to modify construction of conflict graph.
Yes, but that should be easy, right? So what should we do in the construction of? Okay, so let me.
Sorry, what's the question?
Now I want to do this whole algorithm in turnstile model. Like now edges could be deleted.
Okay.
Okay. Why is not moving? Somehow my notability has stopped.
Still, the question is not clear, Sakit, because what is delta for you now? The delta is the worst, or
Delta is the end delta.
sorry?
End delta. You get my point?
No.
But you know it, right? You know it in advance.
So, Fiddler, like in between, delta could be anything. I don't know. It could increase, it could decrease. So, for example, it could be in the turnstile model that at the end, maximum degree is say 10. Okay? But in between, maybe I get a click and then I start decreasing edges, right?
Yeah.
But all the guarantee of delta is at the end. That at the end, maximum degree is this. I do not guarantee you anything in between.
But then why do you care at all about the edges which you delete, right? Because they cannot hurt your coloring.
True. But what will you do for your conflict graph?
Okay.
No, but you are right. So let's implement that suggestion. Okay. What I do, look, I do the same thing. Okay. During the stream, store any edge UV in the subgraph H if LU intersection LV is not phi. Okay. Now, what should you do if deletion comes? Right? Delete an edge UV. Check if it is there. Check if this is there, if this is present in H. If, then delete. Right? This is fine?
Yeah, this is fine.
Right? Because now if you notice that I'm doing nothing extra. If an edge comes, I add it to conflict graph it is. But now if you decided to delete this from your graph itself, why should I keep this in my conflict graph? I also update my conflict graph accordingly. Okay? Okay. But now there are several things to worry about. Okay? There are several things to worry about in this algorithms are following. Okay? What happens to conflict graph at intermediate state? Do you understand? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Because maybe if I look at my suppose I have like say sequence E1, E2, like add, delete. Okay. and say some ej, and suppose we have delete, and suppose this is like q operations. Okay, now I have h1, h2, and the end is hq, it is h, right? All I'm allowed to use is order n polylog n space, right? Now, what could happen? Why can't this be the case that hi has many edges, has much more than order n polylog n edges, right? How do we handle this? Do you understand the difficulty? But if you look at your proof, right? Imagine yourself that whatever, like your algorithm could have just stopped at the GI here, right? Right? I could, like, given a graph GI, it just would have stopped. The stream could also stop here, and I would have got the same HI, because all these choices on HIs are done beforehand of the algorithm, right? Now, our proof actually shows that at each stage, this HI is a sparse subgraph of GI with probability 1 minus 1 to the power n to the power whatever, n to the power something. See, this is okay. Okay? But will this proof work? Can I guarantee that my HI throughout the sequence could remain, for example, sparse?
No, you use delta in the proof, no?
Where did I use delta in the proof? Look, once you choose log n colors, you are only working with those log n colors.
Correct.
Okay, but there's a problem still, right? All I'm guaranteeing that at each step this happens with good probability. Okay, so what is the probability of failure if I try to throw union bound? My probability of failure is times q, right? I could fail with this probability, right? Either in the first step, second step, third step, I could fail into this. So if q is like, say, n to the power c plus 1, I will definitely fail, right? So if the stream is not polynomial size, is not polynomial, okay? Because you have absolutely no guarantee on what is the length of the stream is, right? So if the stream is not polynomial, I mean, the algorithm which I did before is not right. Okay? Like, do you at least understand the difficulty? Even though all these HIs will be sparse, but it's with probability that they, like, so it's with high probability they're sparse, but it could also be that they may not be sparse with probability 1 over NC, right? So now if I want this to be like this, my like space violation, it does not happen, I have to believe that every graph which I get is sparse. Okay, but then if I do union bound over this, then I will fail if the length of the stream is not polynomial. But wait, this issue should have arisen before also, right? Here also. right? Because all I'm saying to you, even in just edge insertion model, that with very high probability, the number of edges in the subgraph H is this, with very high probability. So I need to handle this space requirement even in this algorithm, right? And how do you handle? So you are storing H, okay? If the number of edges in H becomes more than what your computation allows, you just abort, say fail. But you will say that fail with very low probability, right? So that is how you handle space requirement in the edge insertion model algorithm. But now, well, now I cannot, only thing which I'm guaranteed, now I need to, because I'm also deleting edges, now I need to maintain this guarantee at every step. So I cannot say, oh, I did not abort here, I did not abort here, I did not abort here because my space record. But it means I did not abort at each of these steps in H1, H2, HQ because of the space requirement, because for each of them, the space H I took is n polylog n, right? But then my union bound kicks in and then I'm doomed. Okay, okay, good. Any question here? Okay, so how do we, but what are you guaranteed? You are guaranteed that in the end, say GQ, which is G at the end, okay? It has an H, Q, which is H, okay? With high probability, it has at most, say, K edges, where K is like roughly n log square n and some constant. Do you agree? So now I'm going to, this is called data structure. Okay, what is the property of this data structure? So it is K. Okay, what is the property of this data structure? So it's a data structure. It has the following property. Okay, so the property is that if data structure has at most K items, you get back all K items. Okay, if data structure you put up more than K items, will get some K items, okay, and in fact you will get uniformly at random subset of size K, okay, from all the items stored. Okay, I do not guarantee you that I will not guarantee you, but like if you only put K objects here, then I will guarantee you that I will recover all the K objects. But if you gave me more than K items, then all I can guarantee you that I will give you some K size sample, and you can also prove that among the items you have stored. Okay, so think of this. So this proof is basically, think of this way. Suppose I have vectors. Okay, I have vector. Okay, so now what I do basically, I will first apply a hash function. I will not give you a proof, but I will, and suppose you are guaranteed that it has some K items which are non-empty. Okay, so now what I do is that I hash this item, like I hash some. So when I apply hashing, what I'm going to apply hashing? So it will hash to some data structures. Okay, say some K data structures. And what I want that one of the coordinates, like non-zero coordinates, are mapped to a different bucket. Okay, so I apply first this. And so now what are you going to get? You're basically going to get here a vector which has at most one non-zero entry. Okay, and now on each of them, after applying this, only on these coordinates, we will apply L0 sparse recovery, L0 sparse recovery, or L0 recovery algorithm, which we serve, right? And then I can get one. So basically this data structure is consisting of like several L0 data structures, what does L0 data structure allows? If I give you a vector which has exactly like, which could have several items, but it will output you one of the items uniformly at random, right? So now I want k items to be given. So I keep k data structures, but to which coordinates to send, I apply my hash function, which sends the k coordinates of my choice to all this. For example, do you know that, for example, there are hash functions from n to k square, right? Number of such hash functions, like, in fact, k square log n hash functions exist, such that for each subset S of n of size k, there exists some h that maps each element of S distinctly, right? So before applying my L0 sampling, I will apply one of these hash functions, which only follows from pair by the hash function. This is also used in color coding or any object you make. So first you use these small number of hash functions to make them into different buckets. Okay. Now for each of these hash function, okay, and for each of the color, you keep what you call L0 data structure. Now, if I have this data structure, what I'm going to call case recovery sparse structure for us, and this case sparse recovery structure works in a turnstile model, because ultimately what we are going to do is applying L0 sparse recovery, which we have already seen works in a turnstile model. So now what we will do is very simple. We keep one data structure where we put k equal to whatever it comes, alpha n log square n. And whenever an conflict edge comes, so this data structure is maintained by a matrix M. Okay, so whenever a edge is added, you update this matrix, sketch matrix. Whenever an edge is deleted, you update this sketch matrix. That's it. And at the end, what are we going to get? At the end of the algorithm, what I'm going to ask, okay, since this algorithm is like k sparse recovery, if with high probability we know that this algorithm is going to give back my h completely. So I say, okay, return all my edges which I have stored with you. So it will give me whole of h, and I have recovered this h. Okay, and now I will run my algorithm. Okay, so what you do is that I exactly do what we did in the algorithm, but now we do to this data structure. What we do, okay, add edge u comma v, okay, or I'll say delete edge u comma v from this data structure. So whenever you send this delete ev, if this edge is present, it will delete it, or it will mimic it that it is deleting, and that's it. So now we are keeping this h, but we are keeping this h in this data structure. And since we have already told with respect to k what k we want, so at the end of this data structure, okay, it will return us this object with it will recover this h with very high probability. Okay, so this is how we can run this algorithm in turnstile model. Okay, but if you do not know how to use sparse recovery data structure, then just know for sure, just know that there's a data structure which, if it has at most k items, you can get back all k items, and this all happens with high probability. Okay, and if you have more than k items, then you will get a sample of size k plus 1 from your vector at the end with very high probability, and that's it. Okay, so this will take care of the difficulties we had when we are trying to implement this algorithm in turnstile model. And let me add to you that these are nothing specific for this algorithm. These are like a basic objects which has been made, and it is used left, right, center for all the problems. So it is not something which is tailor-made for delta plus 1 coloring, but it's a data structure which is used for many applications to convert a problems working in edge insertion model to in dynamic model. Okay. But more difficult question, okay, is how do we get rid of delta? So this is also trick. So this is why I did not bother. So this was, so what we learned now, so this is, let's say, trick 1. Okay, use this data structure. So trick 2. Guess delta. How will you guess delta? So suppose if you would have been making a polynomial time algorithm, how would we guess delta? We would have like 1, 2, 3, 4, up to n, right? But now streams are coming one by one, and if I cannot write 1, 2, 3, and n and do this, why? Because if we keep n h's, h1, h2, hn, then we are doomed again because we have n square log square n edges, right? So we cannot keep it. This. But can we do some estimate of delta? So I can guess. Okay, maybe delta is between 2 power 0 and 2 power 1. Delta is somewhere here. Or maybe delta is between 2 power 1 but less than 2 power 2. Maybe delta is between 2 power 2 and 2 power 3, so on. How many such guesses we need? Or maybe, yeah. Right? Something like this. Right? These are the possible choices of delta. And this is also a trick which is nothing to do with delta plus 1 coloring, but this is a trick which is used everywhere in streaming. So what I do, I don't know, but I will run these algorithms in parallel. So I said, okay, this is my estimate of delta. Okay. So what is my estimate of delta? Let's say my delta estimate is like 2 power 0. My delta estimate is 2, so on and so forth. Okay, my delta estimate is 2 log n. Okay. Now you notice, so now I run my h, I'm going to construct h1, h2, h delta. So what I will do here, whatever I have guessed my delta to be, I use that value of say 2 delta, okay, because that is what we have, and for every vertex v1, I have log n sample from here, v2 log n sample from here, vn log n sample from here. Similarly, here I do it from 2 delta with this delta. Okay, let's call it, this delta is like say delta 0, delta 1, delta log n. Okay, 2 delta 1, 2 delta log n. Okay, here. Okay. So now I'm not making one graph, okay? I'm making log n graphs, okay? And I also keep a counter which finds me the value of maximum degree at the end, okay? This I can find out, okay? Now what I will do, okay, so, well, there is some guy which is like, so my delta will fall between, so look at the least integer I, such that delta I is greater than equal to, greater than delta least integer I, so that delta I is greater than equal to delta. Now I will work with this delta I. But it could be that because of this, we will be sampling from 4 delta colors. Am I right? Okay. But at least you see that now maybe like if not 2 delta, but we can make it work with 4 delta. But what is beautiful is that we also had this 1 plus epsilon delta. Okay. So what you do is that rather than having this crude approximation to this, you can get to very close approximation to delta. Who has told us to choose that? Let's take the corresponding power of delta as like power of 2. So what we could do is that we can take power of some 1 plus epsilon, right? So I will say 1 plus epsilon 0, 1 plus epsilon to the power 1, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, number of streams changes because you are taking power of something small, but epsilon is some fixed constant. So this will be like log epsilon times n, number of streams. But now you have a much closer approximation to epsilon. So now you will be doing 1 plus epsilon times 2, right? Yeah. Epsilon. What would we doing? We were doing, okay. So if that is my value of delta, so how much color will be used? If this is what, maybe I should not have used. Yeah. So how much colors will be used? Now I still have a value of delta I. So well, delta I could still be as bad as it could be as bad as say 1 plus epsilon to the power I. Okay, but how much color we would have used? Well, we would have used some say 1 plus delta times some delta I colors. Okay, so I mean you can make it some 1 plus delta times 1 plus epsilon to the power I, and you can make it choosing delta appropriately. You can actually make some 1 plus epsilon prime delta. Okay, so you can actually make these things work even this. But there are even more clever trick which people do, at least in the coloring. What they do is that they take this, okay, and now what they do is that, okay, I will work with this, but now if I have a list, okay, if I have a list, I will further sparsify my H as follows. If I have a list which uses color more than 2 delta, okay, just drop it. Right? So you just draw. So for every vertex, look at the list. Okay. If it contains colors like 2 delta plus 1 or something like this, just drop that. Okay. And so on and so forth. You can prove that even this strategy will work. But this is a general trick which I wanted to tell you, that you in parallel, you make different streams with different values of delta or different estimates of delta, and you run your algorithm. At the end, you get the exact value of delta. Because at the end you can find the maximum degree of a vertex and then run your algorithm on the corresponding stream. Now you can improve and this and that. That is just a matter of like doing some computation. Like, okay, why should I do with 2? Why not 1.5? Okay, then you will definitely increase the number of streams, but you will decrease something else, or you can get closer and closer to your best approximation or the best bound. Okay, so this is an usual trick of what do you call doing estimates, like some logarithmic estimates and taking the best answers. Okay, any question? Okay, so if there is no question, let me give you some intuition. Okay, so suppose I'm sampling the lists L1, L2, Ln from delta plus 1. And now let's see why our list greedy algorithm fails. Okay. Suppose we have a click, right? So now, whatever may be the arbitrary thing, you come to here, okay? You are going to sample from delta plus 1, right? So what is the probability that you are going to select a color that is not used on his neighbors. Okay, so look, there's only one choice which is left for you, and you have log n this thing. So you will basically have log n over n. So you will fail. How to say this? You will fail with, say, probability. Let's say how much it will be. Let's see. One second. So look, this is like this is quite a right. So the probability that I will choose this particular color in this is only like log n to the power log n over n. So this algorithm is going to fail roughly like which is like, okay. So this, so what I'm, okay, so I think this is where I made a mistake. Okay. So the probability that you will choose the uncolored color is log n by n, right? So this is little o of 1. Okay. So this is for succeeding, right? So for failing, it is going to be 1 minus little o of 1. That is 1 minus log n over n. So you're going to fail with very high probability. So there is absolutely no way that that you can make this list greedy algorithm fail. But does that mean that we are doomed? Well, no, actually. So these people showed a very, so this is an example which I personally like. So let me make this. So I have a click. Okay. I have a click. Now let's make a bipetide graph. Here I have vertices and here I have palette. Okay. For every vertex, say v1 to vn, I have list v1 and list vn, where this list vi's are chosen from the palette. Okay. And how do I give an edge? If this vertex contains some color in its palette, then I put an edge. Okay. This is what I do. Right. So notice that in the beginning, okay, so what is the condition? Here for the click that we have delta plus 1 coloring. Well, if you notice, if and only if this bipetide graph has a perfect matching. Right? If it has a perfect matching, what is the meaning of this? Well, then I claim that it will contain, because then this tells us that, okay, let me color these vertices. Okay. Now, what does this implies? Because why a perfect matching implies delta plus 1 coloring? Because then every vertex gets a different color, right? because it's a perfect matching, right? And this is like, it's a click, so it is 1 to delta plus 1, and n is basically equal to delta plus 1, right? So if I have a perfect matching in this graph, but notice that in the beginning, every vertex is allowed. So potential palette graph is like, if you think of this as a complete bipartite graph, and then what you get, your H, is basically a subgraph where of a graph where you have vertices, potential colors, and you put edges between them, and then it is a subgraph of this graph, right? Now, all we wanted for click is that for if every vertex, you're going to choose some random subset of size log n. For every vertex, you're going to choose a random subset of size log n. So now you have reduced your problem from, so you're given a graph, you want to construct a bipartite graph. For every vertex, you choose a random subset and of log n size, add an edge, choose a random subset, add an edge, choose a random subset, add an edge, and you are asking a question, after doing this operation, what is the probability that there exists a matching, perfect matching, okay? And I don't care whether this perfect matching exists with good probability, no. It should exist. So like, what is the probability that it should be at least greater than equal to 0? The moment it is, right, we're done, right? But now we have reduced our question from, we have reduced our question about palette sparsification to existence of some particular subgraph in a random graph, right? So in a random graph, it's a very old known theorem that if you sample every vertex, like this is like a threshold of log n, that if you do this, then there exists a perfect matching with like non-zero probability, okay? So this is how people can handle. So it means that actually palette sparsification theorem is true for the click, okay? But what about some other, like, but click is not an arbitrary structure. It just tells us that even with delta plus 1, we can, the palette sparsification theorem is correct for families of clicks. But what about arbitrary graphs? Well, it is in arbitrary graphs, we do what they call dense and dense sparse decomposition, okay? So there are some parts of graph which is dense, some parts of graph which is sparse, okay? And this dense part of the graphs are like almost clicks, okay? And this is like, these are the kind of objects which have been used quite a lot in the coloring literature. So sparse structure you can handle, almost click you should be able to handle something, but it is not about question of perfect matching. Almost dense graph, whatever the definition is, you will ask that if this is how I have constructed my random graph, does there exist some particular structure which is like, but the good thing about that structure is that it's sparse. So for example, here we were asking about the structure like perfect matching. So similarly, if for example, if you take a click and delete a perfect matching and ask, what are you looking for? So essentially what you're looking for is that, look, I don't need perfect matching. All I care is that all these vertices here, they're like, all these vertices here has degree 1 in that subgraph, and the vertices which they are mapped to, right? This should be an independent set in my graph, right? So on this, you define a kind of subgraph, sparse subgraph, and they show that in any graph, right, such subgraphs exist. And that is how the proof goes, okay? When you want to sparsify from delta plus 1. So my objective was not to tell you the whole proof, but to motivate you if you're interested to go and look at the paper, okay? Any question before we move on to a different topic? Now I will only work in insertion model, okay? So slightly easier. Not because I want to work in insertion model, because there are no results in turnstile model. So, okay. So now, so you know what matching is. It's basically set of edges that are pairwise vertex disjoint. Okay. Now, if edges are coming in the stream, okay, can we get some matching. Of course, as large as possible. Any algorithm?
Greedy.
Yes. Right. So as Piotr suggested, as edges are coming, you store a partial matching M, okay? And when a new edge arrives, okay? When a new edge arrives, okay? Check if it can be added to M. If yes, add it to M. Right? And what I mean by check if it can be added, this edge does not intersect an edge in M. Okay? So this is my algorithm for maximum matching. Okay. What do you think is an approximation factor of this algorithm? Okay. I'm sure all of you know. So suppose my M star be the maximum matching, or be a maximum matching. Can we say anything about M star and the M which we have got? Can we relate them? I will give you a very overly complicated argument in a minute, but if someone has a simpler argument, then that will be great.
Okay, it's two approximation. Every edge of M is an edge of M star, or it's intersects two edges of M star.
Exactly. Right. So as Piotr pointed out, in fact, what we can show that M star is less than or equal to 2 times M. Okay. Now I'm going to give you an overly complicated argument, and on purpose. Okay. It's not something which I wish to do, but I think this will make our life easier as we go along. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to define a mapping from sigma from M star to M. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to, so this is like a kind of charging argument. Okay. So I'm going to, for every edge in M star, I'm going to charge to some edge in M. Okay. And I will show to you that no edge in M is charged too much times, and that will give us a kind of upper bound on M star. Okay. So here's my mapping for an edge E in M star intersection M. I charge E to E in M, right? So sigma is E. Okay, this is very nice. Now, for any edge E in, so I'm just making what Piotr said, but as a charging argument. Okay, for any edge E in M star minus M, there should be an edge F in M, okay, incident on one of the vertices, okay, one of the vertices of E, okay, as otherwise we would have added, right, E to M. Do you agree? So now what I will do this, in this case, I'm going to map sigma E to F, okay? Notice that there could be some other edge also which this guy could be adjacent to, but I just choose one of the edge and like arbitrarily, like breaking ties arbitrarily and map it. Okay. Now let's ask ourselves the following question. Okay. So now we say that edge E in M star is charged to the edge. Okay. What do you call sigma E in M, or rather, the people also use this terminology. Okay. Sigma E in M is blamed. If you look at the real paper, they say killed or killer, murderer. I will also use those words in a minute. Okay. Sigma in E in M is blamed for the edge E in M star. Okay. So whatever you want to call it. Okay. Now notice what is the property. So we can show that for any edge E, okay, for any edge F in M, what can we say is the following set? Set E in M star, sigma E is equal to F. What is the size of this set? Look, you have an edge F, right? Now M is also a matching edge, right? So matching is why. So you can, like, suppose there are some E1, E2 which are mapped to this. Okay. Now why is this mapped? And these edges are in M star. This guy is mapped to F because F and E1 are adjacent. Okay. So maybe it is adjacent at this particular vertex. Okay. Now there can at most be one more edge who could be adjacent to this vertex, and when I am doing sigma E2, I'm breaking ties arbitrarily, I'm mapping to this guy. So there is no set here whose size is less than, who's more than 2. So this is at most 2. Okay. Now notice that, in other words, this which, and what does this imply? Every edge E in M star, okay, every edge in M star, edge E in M star is mapped to some F, right? Which implies that cardinality of the, let's say this sets, I don't know. So cardinality of E in M star, sigma E equal to F. Okay. So cardinality of M star is less than equal to this. And this is, each of them is at most 2. So this is 2 times M. Okay. I know this is overly complicated, but I just wanted to give you a handle to this. Okay. Okay. So some comments here. So comment number 1, remark. Okay. This is the best we know in one pass. Okay. We do not even know 1.9 approximation is possible in, is possible in one pass. Okay. But you can get to 1 plus epsilon approximation in order 1 over, I think, okay, so let's call it order poly 1 over epsilon passes, right? So if you allow yourself several passes, which depends on epsilon, okay, only polynomial, then you can get to 1 plus epsilon approximation. Okay. Okay. So this is a remark. Now, what about weighted matching? Okay. Okay. What about weighted matching? And now we will assume that we have a weight function from edge to say some numbers from say 1 to capital W, where W is say poly n. for a chain. Okay. Do you know a simple greedy algorithm for weighted matching? Hello? Like forget about dynamic, just like static setting. If I gave you, say, linear time, can you come up with a weighted algorithm? Like, can you come up with, say, order n plus m algorithm for weighted matching? Look, the previous algorithm is really, really bad. We cannot do previous algorithm. Okay, why? Because, for example, a previous algorithm is bad because even in streaming setting, at least in a streaming setting, this is, I mean, we cannot implement the previous algorithm. I'll give you an example. Because imagine yourself that there's a path. Okay, and suppose it has weight 2, this has weight 100, this has weight 2, again this is a weight 100, and this is a weight 2. I mean, okay. So now if the first edge came, what will you do? You pick this up, right? Next edge, I can't pick this up because this intersects. Then again, I will pick up this edge. Again, I will pick up this edge. Okay. In terms of maximal matching, in fact, this is the maximum matching. But in terms of weight, well, I have got 6, but actually the maximum matching is 200. So that previous greedy algorithm is definitely not going to work, right? Even if you have done in the like static setting and you were arbitrarily considering these edges, there's absolutely no way this algorithm will work. So then what can you do to make this work even in static setting? So how does the greedy algorithm in static setting work? Like you go over these edges in an arbitrary order, and at any point of time, you try to add this edge to your partially constructed maximal matching or matching, if you can add it. So this is what we did. But how can we fix this algorithm?
Sort the edges in weights.
Correct. Great. Yes. So here is a idea, which is sort the edges in decreasing order and consider the weight and do the greedy algorithm. Okay. This is an exercise, and this is really an exercise. Okay. I'm not going to prove this. Okay. And then you can show that weight of m star, the optimum matching, is less than or equal to 2 times weight of matching which you will store. Okay. Okay. So this is great algorithm in a static setting. So you sort them. That will take you like, I mean, if the weights are polynomial, you can do it in linear time. This is why I use poly n. But even otherwise, you could have sorted them in n log n time. Okay. And then you run this greedy algorithm from highest weighted to the lower weight. And if you do this, this is a factor 2 approximation for weighted matching. But if we have no choice to sort them in, so how will we go about doing it?
Can we construct a maximum spanning tree first?
Maximum weight spanning tree or maximum?
Yes.
No,
Yes.
sir. That is also not possible in one pass. Okay.
So again, we can do something like greedy. Maybe like we can keep an edge if there is no conflict with the already chosen edge in my matching. And if there is
that is exactly what I showed you, right? It will give you very bad, right? Look at this path, 200, 202, and first.
Yeah, but I'm going to change, like alter my matching also.
Okay. Okay. So how?
So,
okay.
So for example, like if I have 2 at first, then I will take 2.
Okay.
But then I have 100. Then what I will do is like I will check. So what are the already existing edges with which it has conflict,
Okay.
and then I will and I can have conflict with at most 2 edges.
Yes.
And if the weight of those 2 edges is lesser than the current edge, then I will replace my the matching with the current edge. I don't know how bad it will be.
Oh yeah. So let's prove that this is very bad. I think so. Let me think for a minute. Okay. It's a very good strategy, and we will make some strategy like this in a minute, some modification of this. But let's say, okay, I think let's consider path again. Okay. I think I thought about it today morning. So I think I should have an example. Okay. 1, 2, 3, say up to W. Okay. Now what your algorithm will do? I came 1, next comes 2, right? At this point of time, it is only conflicting with one edge. What will it do? It should kick out, right?
Yeah, I can see that. So the
Okay, so now I have 2. Okay.
W.
Okay,
Yeah.
so now third comes. It has only one edge. So now it should kick out 2 and keep 3. Okay.
Yeah, we
Good.
will always keep the last edge.
Exactly. So the only thing which we'll get is W. But if I could have picked up 1, 3, 5, 7, something, so
W
then
square.
so M star has like roughly omega W squared, but the matching which you will construct is W. Okay. So
Yeah.
this slight refinement of strategy is not going to work. Okay. But something of this nature will work. Okay. In a minute. Okay. Okay. So now somehow we have to compensate whatever mistakes you have done in this example. Okay. And we'll try to fix that up. Is the
maintain 2 or 3 data structures parallelly?
Yeah, I can maintain anything you want me to do.
I mean, so when we are storing 2 in 1, I mean, the 3 kicks instead of kicking out, I mean, it kicks out 2 in one of the data structures and keeps 2 in the other. Like this way, you have 2 or 3 parallel copies, maybe.
Yeah, but maybe after some point of time, someone comes and kicks them out. All right. Like, I don't know. I mean, I cannot make a counterexample immediately to what you were saying, but yeah, but I mean, I'm not saying that is right or wrong. All I'm saying that I do not see whether it will work or not work. Okay. So given that we all tried and failed, okay, let me give you some history just to feel that, okay, we are not dumb. Okay. So here's the history. Okay. So the history is, okay, let me write. So there was the first paper in some year back. I don't know when it was. It gave a factor 6 approximation. Okay. So this is the paper which defined semi-streaming algorithm actually. Okay. And then there was a paper in 2005 who gave 5.828 okay approximation, and this paper was in like some approx random 2005. And then there was a paper with 5.585, I think 2009 or 10, I think 2010, 5.585. The reason I'm writing this because I have no idea why these algorithms were made. Okay. Okay. 2011, like there's a 2011, there was an algorithm which was made in 4.911 plus epsilon. Okay. This was in sigma, and I think iCalc, I don't remember very well. And then there was a approximation 4 plus epsilon. So this was like already we came in 2014, and there was a 4 plus epsilon approximation, and this was in again approx random. And then came this big breakthrough in 2017. So this is 2 plus epsilon, okay, and this is like SODA 2017. And it was one of the, I think, again, some best SODA paper or some such thing. Okay, so this is the history. Okay, so when I was trying to teach today, I was preparing for my lecture. I did not want to tell this algorithm the way it is written, and I tried to use parameter to do whatever he suggested, Cyan. And then I am getting some numbers which are like better than all these numbers. So either I'm making a very dumb mistake, or they just didn't think from this perspective. Either way, you have to be careful. I might say something not completely correct, maybe. Okay, not entirely, but let's see. Okay, so here's my algorithm for maximum weighted matching, like my first algorithm. So I will spend some time on matching because it is one of the most well-studied problem in streaming, and all the other is just an insertion model, and we do not know how to be 2 plus epsilon both unweighted and weighted in one pass. Okay. So this is a maximum weight matching algorithm. This is first algorithm. We will do three algorithms actually. Okay. So my algorithm is very simple. My initially M is empty set, and for I equal to 1 to M, like the streams, what are we going to do? Okay. Now let's say C equal to E prime in M. Okay. And E prime intersection EI is not equal to empty set. So C is basically conflicting set. I check if weight of E prime, if weight of EI, okay, is say greater than equal to say 1 plus some gamma, and this is what gamma we will fix. Gamma will fix, okay, later. Okay, times weight of C, okay. Then what I'm going to do, M is M minus C plus EI, okay, and while, and for, okay, output M, okay. Now notice that what I'm doing this, look, so all I'm saying that at any point of time, I have this partially constructed matching, some new edge comes, suppose this edge came, right? So this is what C is, okay, E prime in M, so the E prime intersection, so this is my I, and this is say E prime, and this is E double prime, which belongs to C, okay? Now I check, I sum the weight of this, and I check, is the total weight less than, so what Cyan said is that, oh, if this weight is just greater than gamma was 0, right? Then you would replace. And that we saw a counterexample. Now I have associated other parameter gamma. I said, if this weight is like some threshold 1 plus some constant times weight of C, then do replacement. Okay? Then delete these two edges and add this edge AI. Okay? Is the algorithm clear? Right? It's also a greedy algorithm, right? So at any point of time, I'm maintaining a matching. If a new edge comes, I look at the edges which it intersects with, I check their weight. If their weight is significantly larger, whatever that means, compared to my current weight, then I kick out those two edges, and then, what is that called? Then keep this edge. And that's end of it. Okay? And then we will prove that let M star be a max weight matching. Okay, and then we will be able to prove that weight of M star is less than or equal to some function of gamma times weight of M. I don't know why I'm writing cardinality. Okay. Okay, so this will be our goal. This is our goal. Okay, so let's introduce some. So this is very tricky algorithm, and this is why I was trying to do this charging argument in the beginning. Okay, because we will use those kind of arguments here. Okay, so let me use some terminology. Okay, let me use some terminology. I will say edge is born. Okay, if it is either part of M. Okay, and we'll say edge is killed if it is born, but subsequently removed from M by a heavier edge. Okay. Okay. So people, at least this is how the paper says. Okay. Don't tell me for. Okay. So what they say, new edge murdered this new edge murdered the killed edge. I don't know why this kind of terminology, but this is what it is. The killed edge. Okay. Okay. An edge is a survivor. Okay. If it is born and never gets killed. Okay. Let S be the survivor edges. Now notice that this is precisely weight of S is equal to weight of M. Okay. Okay. Now let's try to understand, let's say, depth trail of an edge. Okay. Let's try to see a depth trail of an edge. Okay. Depth trail of an edge is very interesting. So I am an E. Okay. So what I'm going to do is for a fixed, so you fix an edge E. Okay. So this is my E. I'm going to call C0 its set E. Now it's possible that it killed. How did you get in? You killed up edges, which was, it killed up some edges. So I'm going to call C1 edges that were killed by E. Okay. What is C2? Well, it is union of say F in C1, okay, edges killed by F. So basically these two edges also might have killed some edges, so on and so forth. Okay, so what is Ci? Ci is basically F in Ci minus 1, okay, and the edges murdered by F. So this is my Ci is, okay, and but the best thing is to view this as this tree. Okay, let's view this as this tree. Okay, maybe only one, and so on and so forth. Right? Okay. Now there is a interesting property. What we would like to say. Now let's look at a layer and the layer below him. Okay. So suppose I have this layer. Let's call this Ci minus 1, and let's call this Ci. Okay. What is the property of this layer? Okay, so these are the edges which have come by killing these edges. So what can we say? Okay, so let's partition this edges by who killed them. Okay. So these two edges were killed by him. This edge is killed by him. This edge is killed by him. And why did they kill these edges? So well, suppose this is some edge X, this is an Y, Z. Why did it kill edge? Because weight of X is greater than or equal to the edges which it kills, right? 1 plus gamma times, okay, edges, weight of edges X kills, okay. Now, weight of Y is similarly 1 plus gamma times Y kills. Weight of Z is greater than 1 plus gamma times Z kills. Now, if you sum this up, what is this weight of X, weight of Y, weight of Z? This is simply weight of C minus 1. This is simply weight of C minus 1, which is, and now I'm also this, which is simply 1 plus gamma times. Now, what are these? These are just weight of edges here, here. And look, an edge is killed by only one because only one edge. So it is disjoint. And this is, but if you sum these edges, like these edges do not survive here, which means that that this is greater than or equal to weight of Ci minus 1, or rather, what can we say is that weight of Ci is greater than or equal to weight of Ci plus 1. Okay, so this is true for, so for all I, what is I greater than or equal to 0? What is true? Weight of Ci is greater than or equal to 1 plus gamma times weight of Ci plus 1, right? Now, if I, okay, so let's say T of E is union I greater than or equal to 1 Ci, okay? Okay, so these are the people which either E killed or it was killed because of someone whom he killed. So this is why I use the word death trail. So now, what is this? If I, for all I greater than or equal to 0, this, now if you sum this up, okay, what are they going to get? So if I'm going to summation, say J going from 0 to, I don't know, something, say J greater than or equal to 0, whatever this curve, weight of Ci is greater than or equal to summation J going from greater than or equal to 0, 1 plus gamma times weight of Ci plus 1. Now, what is this equal to? Well, I'm going from J greater than or equal to 0. So this is basically weight of E plus weight of T of E, all the people. And this is greater than or equal to 1 plus gamma times. What is this? This is basically everything except the first E, which is equal to weight of TE, which implies that weight of E is at least weight of TE greater than gamma. So this is the first thing which we have proved. Okay? Okay. Any doubt here or any question? Okay. So now look, I mean, we are able to upper bound the weight of E by just that extra factor gamma with respect to all the edges which were killed because of him, or I mean, killed because of whom he killed, or his killer, like, or those who got killed by him killed. Okay, so the union of all the death trail gives us kind of lower, like, so if you think of this way, the total number of edges which got killed by all this is gamma times weight of E. Okay.
Saket, the last line,
Yes.
is gamma in the denominator or in the numerator?
Denominator, right? Because weight of TE went here. Okay, right. So this gets cancelled. No, you're right. This should be at wrong place. Gamma is here. Right? Because weight of E is greater than gamma times weight of TE. So weight of T is less than equal to weight of E times gamma. Okay. This makes sense. Okay. Right. Okay. So now what I would like to do, okay, so let's do a careless analysis and then we will do a careful analysis. Okay. So now I want to again, let's look at, say, M star, which is like O1, O2, OL. So this is my optimum band, optimum matching, max weight matching. Now I want to define this function sigma from M star to M, such that if I can show that the charge acquired by any matching is not too much, then we will be able to somehow get a bound on M star, weight of M star in terms of weight of M. So what we do is the following, okay? So first thing, for O in M star intersection M, you map sigma O to O itself. Okay, so this is the first thing. Now, so now if O is U comma V in M star minus M. Okay, O. Okay, then okay, so now why did you not add this edge? Right? So there is two reasons why let me think for a minute. Okay. So the first case, U comma V or O was never included in M, right? This is one case. Do you agree? But in this case, why did that happen? Because when I look at the constraint which I have, right? When a new edge comes, I look at, is this edge and the set of edges which it is incident to, is the weight of this is large enough, right? If it is large enough, then only we add it. Otherwise, we do not add it, right? So was never included in it. It's not that it was included, but later someone killed this edge. It was not happened. So there are two cases. Either a maximum matching edge when it came, I looked at the incident edges, and then I checked, oh, this guy weight is like the edges which are already there in my current matching is more or less good enough. So I do not include him, okay? Or they were not good enough, so I included him, but later some even more heavier edge came and we moved him out, okay? Okay, so so O was never included in M. Now notice what we do is that now we will add its charge to, okay, at this point of time, first of all, notice that weight of O is less than equal to 1 plus gamma times weight of, say, CO. Okay, I mean, okay, let's say, let's not call it CO. CO. What is CO? Edges in M that O intersects with. This is true. Now what I will try to do, look, there are two cases, okay, here also, okay. O intersects with, say, one edge, E, okay. Okay, then what will I do? Okay, then sigma of O is E. So you put your all charge to him. So when I say put all charge to him, so like, I mean, it will get a charge which is equivalent to its weight. Okay, otherwise, suppose O intersects with, say, E1 and O intersects with, say, E2. Now I will do something different. What I will do weight of O times weight of E1 divided by weight of E1. Now this guy O is mapped to both E1 and E2, okay, and I will give him different charges. So what is the charge I will give to E1? I will give a charge which is proportion to its weight, okay. And to E2, what will be give charge to E2? Well, weight of O times weight of E2 divided by weight of E1 plus weight of E2. So if think of this way, that if we had unit cost, then I give half weight to one edge, another half edge to other edge. But irrespective of what this is, notice that there is something interesting happening here. Weight of E1 times weight of E1 plus weight of E2 is less than equal to what we know about weight of O? Well, we know that weight of O is less than equal to 1 plus gamma times weight of E1 plus weight of E2, right? Times weight of E1 divided by weight of E1 plus weight of E2. This and this will get cancelled. So this is less than equal to 1 plus gamma times weight of E1, right? So basically, this is an invariant which we are trying to maintain. What is an invariant? Every edge E in M star, okay, gives any edge charge of at most, say, any edge F charge of at most 1 plus gamma times weight of F. Okay. Now this was a case when O was never included in M. But now I also have a second case, okay, which is O, say UV is included in M but was then removed. Okay. So then what will we do? We are not going to, so this is slightly different. So this is where we will change. We will not map to M, but rather all the edges that were either part of M. Okay. And then at the end, you will see that you can take help of all this and get this mapping. But it is good at this point of time. So UB was included in M, but was never, but was then removed. So then you just map O to O itself. Okay. Now let's try to see what is happening. Suppose I have E1, E2, and EL. These are the edges which are in my M. Now look at the death trail of these guys. Okay. I'm going to do a very rough computation. Let's ask ourselves how much an edge here will be charged. So how many edges of M star, how many edges of M star can give him charge? How many edges? Look, you fix an edge any point of time, okay? Now, all it could happen that this edge was not included and this edge was not included. But both of them gives charge to him. But I know for sure that if this edge is F, this guy will give him charge, say 2 times weight of F. This will give him charge 2 times weight of F. That's it. Like any edge. So look, what is this death tail shows you? These are all the edges that we have ever considered in our matching. These are the survivor and these are the one who got killed in this process. Now I'm putting charges on all the edges of edges which ever were part of M. And now I'm saying let's put edges on each of these guys. Okay, wait. So look, some M star came and put here, some M star came and put here. So now notice that each edge, let's look at this M star, which is O1, O2, say OX. Okay. If O1 belong to M, O1 belong to M, O1 belong to M, we'll count them as M. Okay. Otherwise, if O2 did not belong to M, then maybe its charge is at most 2 times, but it was part of somewhere here, right? It was part of somewhere here. So in the worst case, what you have done is that this guy would have also contributed. He himself was like, he himself was there at part of some point of time and then got killed in the worst case, right? So at any point of time, if I sum all these weights of all these objects, okay, and I multiply with 5 times, okay, because look, each edge could go and contribute 2 times something of a killed edge. Okay, maybe this guy, like, but this he can do it to 2 edges. Okay, but so this guy will charge himself how many times? Well, he passes his charge 4 times. Okay, and maybe for himself he will count. Okay, so in total, if I start counting the weights of everything ever, okay, so let's see what happens then. Okay, so this is like M star, weight of M star is less than equal to weight of M. Okay, this is for those edges which are counted here. Okay, now let's ask ourselves, okay, so let's ask ourselves, okay, so this is those edges which were part of M. Now I want to count all these guys, okay, all these guys. So, okay, all these guys. So now I want to write, say, 5 times summation E in M weight of TE, because for each of these guys, like what is weight of TE? Like each edge I have counted, weight counted once. Now I am multiplying each edge by 5 times in the worst case. Okay, so this is like 5 times weight of TE, because that will take care of all the charges ever the M star has given to any of these edges. Okay, it is never more than 4 times, and I also counted his own edge. And so weight of M star is, so let's actually, this is like M intersection M star. So those edges which are in the intersection plus those who counted here, and there could be okay, and each of these edges E1, E2, EL, those can also be get counted, like those could also be charged by these killing objects, right? So what do you call the edges which you the O could have also, because it was killed, or it like because it was an E1 was already present, E2 was already present, and when I try to add O, now there could be, so I try to try to present O, then I also give charge to E1, I also give charge to E2. So you have to also count these guys. So that will probably give you 4 times weight of, say, M. Okay. Now, this is like, say, I'm just being very lazy. And so this is like 5 times weight of M. Now let's try to see what is this. Okay. Now I know something about weight of TE. Weight of T is less than equal to weight of E by gamma. Right? So this is like 5 times summation E in M, weight of E divided by gamma. So this is like 5 times weight of maximum matching and 5 times gamma weight of maximum matching. So this is like 5 plus 5 by gamma weight of maximum matching. So if you put, say, gamma equal to 1, right, this will give you factor 10 approximation. Right? If I substitute gamma equal to 1. Or there is something wrong here. Because what happens if I substitute gamma equal to 5?
So I think in the second inequality, the summation will be over M star instead of M.
Here there's a problem.
So in the second inequality, the summation will be over M star.
Where? Here?
Yeah, in the second inequality, so you have the plus 5 summation of E belongs to M. So I think that would be E belongs to M star.
No. Let me explain why that is okay. Okay. So look at these trees. Okay. Look at these trees. Okay. Look at these trees, and what I said that if I sum the edges of all this except say E1, right? If I sum the edges of E except this, so now look, every charge. Why did I 2 times WF? That is a problem. That is a problem. All I proved is 1 plus gamma, right? Look, so this is a problem. Here I wrote 1 plus gamma, right? Right? So the charges which you give is 5 times 1 plus gamma. Do you get my point? Okay, so let me clean this up. Okay. What I mean to say is this, look, every edge, how much charge this guy collects? This guy collects charge from one of the edges, it collects charge 1 plus gamma times its own weight. Okay? This is what it collects. And 2 edges can give him charge. So it collects, so this is not correct. So what I should do here is first, all the charges it collects because of other people, right? Which is 2 times, at most 2 times 1 plus gamma. This is what every edge, because all I'm saying that look at the total charge which I have accumulated over all the edges. Let's count that. Okay. So now because that is what is the contribution of M star is, right? So what is the contribution of M star? So this guy contributed, and this is not correct. It is like all we prove that this is an invariant. Every edge in EM star gives any edge F a charge of at most 1 plus gamma times the weight of F, right? So, and everybody collects charge from at most 2 edges. So he has everybody here collects charge of at most 2 into say 1 plus gamma. This is what everybody in this tree has collected. Everybody and its own weight, right? So this is why this multiplier is 2 into 1 plus gamma, right? And I also need to count, do I need to count for him? Well, no, because why I don't need to count for him? Yeah, we also need to count for him, because you could be that I also have the case, right? When I said that if an edge is killed, it maps to itself, okay? So, but in that case, it is like 2 into 1 plus gamma. I also need to write another summation E in M, weight of TE. Okay, this is what it is. Okay, so now this is like 5 times weight of M. And what you will get from here is like 2 plus 2 gamma plus 1. Okay. So this is like 3 plus 2 gamma. Now it should be fine. So what are we getting? We are getting 5 plus, this gamma is there, 5 plus 3 plus 2 gamma divided by gamma times weight of M. Okay. And now if you put gamma equal to say 1, you will get 10 approximation. But if you try to minimize gamma, you can do better, but you cannot do better than say, for example, 5. Okay. But this is not a tight computation. Okay. We have done lots and lots of overcounting. So I will leave you today here. So next week, maybe I'll just take class on Monday and complete this matching. Okay. And do a little bit better and careful analysis of whatever we did. Okay. And that will give us a slightly better approximation. And I will do another matching algorithm. Okay. So let me leave it here. Okay. Okay. So, but you see that like algorithms are very simple, but the analysis and the way the charging happens, they are not that easy to do all the time. Okay. Okay. It's already 5:40. So, okay. So let's.
Can we return to the beginning when you start with construction at this tree, killer tree?
Yeah, this one?
Above.
This one?
Yeah, when you prove bound somehow.
Okay, so Piotr, what I'm saying is following. Let's fix 2 layers.
No, this I understand, but further. What is the final claim? So weight of E divided by gamma is at least the sum of weights of.
So this we proved, right? So what we proved?
I just want to be sure that I got something right, because I'm got confused. No, well, you have this inequality that weight of E divided by gamma is at least weight of all 3.
Yes. No, each edge weight E by gamma is greater than weight of its corresponding depth tree.
Yes, but take gamma 1.
Yes, take gamma equal to 1.
So each edge then kills some, edge in M kills a lot of edges maybe, but the total weight of killed edges.
But look, what is gamma? Look, then in algorithm we are going to set that if the weight of my edge is 2 times the weight of the killed edges, more than 2 times.
Yes.
Yes. So I didn't get your question.
No. Well, let us
Okay.
stop here.
Okay.
So a bit further, please.
Further, okay, here.
So, well, this inequality in frame.
This one.
Yes. Weight of E is at least weight of all the tree.
No, corresponding tree.
Yes, corresponding tree.
Yes, yes. Weight of E divided by gamma is at least, yes. So if you substitute gamma equal to 1, this just implies that weight of E is more than weight of T of E. Yes, it is true.
Yes, but T of E, well, T of E, it's a tree of all, edges that killed by E and is discordant. Yes?
Yes, this is true. This is true.
Yes, but somehow I got confused. So, well, you kill, E is in M.
Yes.
So it kills some edges of M star.
Don't look at from the M star. Look, this is not, look, not all the edges of M star will appear in M, right?
No, yes, well, but if it's edge, in M, but not in M star, it kills some edges.
No.
M star.
No.
Why?
Why? Look, this is exactly what. So suppose an edge of O comes, okay? You want to include him in the M, but you are not able to include him in the M. Why? Because look at the edges which it is adjacent to, right? Those guys' weight is like, this guy's weight is less than equal to 1 plus gamma times the corresponding weights. Then it is not going to displace, right? Nobody is going to kill anybody.
Okay, fine.
Right? So even though you are edge of M star, but the edges which you want to replace, they together also are not too light that you can just displace them.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the one case, and this is where you distribute your charges. Okay, fine. I was not taken, but look, you are the two people who are not letting me in. But okay, then you take my weight on yourself.
Okay, fine.
Okay.